Hello, hello, hello.
And welcome to the Hildebrand Law Firm topic for today.
I'm Kirsten Hildebrand.
And I'm Matt Kaplan.
And today we're going to talk about a relevant topic that everybody is talking about, and that is the new tariffs.
Oh, I thought we were going to talk about Katy Perry going into space.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
We don't care about that. Katy can do whatever she wants.
True.
What I care about is what's happening to the stock market, to pretty much every one of our clients, and how different decisions that are being made in Washington that nobody fully understands can be potentially affecting what's happening with people's financial resources.
Right, and in a world that is uncertain, one thing that people need to realize is that the stock market goes up, the stock market goes down. We as individuals really don't have control over it. We can ride it out. We can choose to freak out when things go low, or we can choose to celebrate when things go high, but ultimately it's not up to us. And so what are some things that we can do?
This is a really, really good question, and this is why our estate planning is oriented the way it is, because what we do is we really think about worst case scenarios. And I find it interesting that in the times of plenty, most people are not thinking about worst case scenarios. They're thinking, oh, it might not matter whether I protect my assets for our beneficiaries, our loved ones, because there's tons of money and they're doing super well and there's no real need to think about that. Mm-hmm. Or they might think, well, there's plenty of money here for us to be able to afford whatever we need, so it's just not that important to think about asset protection relevant to being able to get benefits from the government for long-term care. But then when the boat gets a little rocky, all of a sudden people start feeling a little less secure. Maybe that money really isn't there like I thought it was, because now my asset depreciation is pretty significant. Mm-hmm. So what can we control in those situations? Well, first of all, we can control how much we are protecting those assets. And so we have a beautiful Medicaid compliant asset protection trust that we can put assets into to make sure that they are preserved for the future, because we really don't know, do we?
No.
I think about all of the different roller coasters that have happened even in my lifetime in terms of what has happened with assets. I mean, I lived through the crisis of 2008, which really went all the way through, in some instances, all the way to 2012, 13, even 14, where the real estate market was really depreciated. So during that time frame, people were very concerned about making sure that their assets were protected. Similarly, in 2001, we had another issue, and then 2011. So these things happen.
And it's always nice to have some form of stability in times like this that can be really rocky. And where we're going to get stability from is from a well-written trust, in my opinion. And the reason is like what we started the video with, so many things right now are out of our control. Mm-hmm. The really nice thing about trust is that everything under the trust is under our control. So that's why one thing that Kirsten and I never suggest is I'm going to give money away to my kids so I can eventually qualify for Medicaid, or I want to protect my money so I'm giving it away. No, you lose all control over that. So in times like this where the market's going up, the market's going down, there's tariffs, there maybe aren't tariffs, we don't know what's going to happen. Let's try to distill it down to what can we control. Mm-hmm. And the things we can control is the stuff within our trust. And what stuff is usually within your trust? For most people, their home. You want to make sure your home is safe. You want to make sure some investments that you have is safe. Maybe that money market account, maybe some savings accounts, anything like that. You want to make sure that that stuff is safe for your kids. So no matter what happens to the market, the thing that's most likely to happen to us is not the market crashing, it's us going to a nursing home.
That's right.
That's way more likely than the market crashing.
Way more likely. You know, I thought about this too with respect to like homeowners insurance. We have been paying insurance for those of us who own homes for our entire lives. And I don't know about you, but I've only made one claim, I think, when we had our first house 30 years ago. And it was because of a windstorm that came through with our roof and blew up half our shingles. Besides that, we haven't had a single thing that we have had a claim for on our insurance, and I would love to add up the thousands
Right.
and probably even hundreds of thousands of dollars we've spent on homeowners insurance through all of these years, and nothing has happened.
Right.
Now, compare that to your chance of going into a nursing home, which is what?
70%?
Is that right?
I heard the chances of needing some form of long-term care is about 70%.
I mean, that's huge.
Huge.
That's
Yeah.
a huge number. So would you run around with a home without insurance if you had a 70% chance of having a house fire? I doubt it.
No.
That would not be a great idea,
No.
would it? And so similarly, this is like getting a one-time insurance payment to make sure that the assets are protected for the ones that you love. And that's why it's so important to think these things through.
Right, and especially in a situation like what's going on with all this market volatility, maybe it's a good idea for some folks where they want to restrict their direct access to their funds, because maybe they're the type of folks that say, my money's going down, I want to hold on to my money. You know, people have thoughts of the Great Depression where there were runs on the banks and people couldn't have access to their money. What's interesting about, depending on what type of trust you have, you may not have the ability to say, I want my money, give it right to me. No, you may not have that ability, kind of protecting you from your future self. Like, for example, I really don't like seafood. I know that if I went somewhere and I took a bite into what I thought was a chicken finger, turned out to be a fish stick, I would freak out. So if I just restrict my access to any fried things that are about this big that look like that, I don't have any issues. So think of that, something like that. You know, you want to make sure that your stuff is safe, your stuff is protected. Whether it goes up or down, that's a whole different story. You know, your risk tolerance, that's something that you have a conversation with your advisor as to when markets are uncertain. Do you have the risk tolerance to ride it out? If not, you should, talk to your advisor. But for our standpoint, one of the nice things about the trust is that the trust stays in place regardless of what happens to the market. The trust is the perpetual, we're going to ride out this storm.
Yes, that's exactly right. And why do we do it? Mainly because we want to make sure that the people we love are going to have resources. So even though it might look phenomenal right now, there is a possibility that in the future, that picture would look really different. And wouldn't it be sad if you could spend a minimal amount of money protecting your house from being able to get eaten up by those nursing home cost cares, and then the house got taken away, and then a grandchild could have really used it, or a child could have really used it, or another loved one could have really used it. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about making sure that we're thinking about those contingencies. We are lawyers trained to think about worst case scenarios, and that's because they happen, not because they don't happen.
Right.
And so the fact that we're saying this is really, it should be taken into consideration, that you really need to consider the possibility that things might look very different in the future with respect to assets that can be protected now in these different trusts.
Yeah, and mentally, I want people to get to the point where, do you remember a few years ago, gas prices like shot up?
Yes.
And it was like $4, $5 a gallon, and in certain parts of the country it was like $7 or $8 a gallon. All I remember from that moment were all of my friends on Facebook who had electric cars who were like, haha, we don't care about this. Look at all the news going on in the country. We are safe. We feel secure. That's what I want people to have when it comes to these types of documents. Yeah, maybe your accounts might go up and down, but you know that at your core, your stuff is protected.
That's exactly right. I think that our heart is for you. Our heart is to make sure that you have your assets protected appropriately. So thanks so much for joining us. Consider coming in and getting some more information on our asset protection trust. Thanks so much.